So guys, until we get to the review of round 21, massive round that we had, and we started off with the Bulldogs versus the Tigers, and I think the Bulldogs just are a huge response team. We've seen that throughout a lot of their season, that they will respond after getting a lot of backlash throughout the week that was, and they did get a lot of backlash last week, but they did respond very nicely, and led by Marcus Bontempelli. He was massive. One of the best games from the season. That's a big thing to say, because he's had a lot of big games this season, but he led from the front for the Bulldogs and got them over the line, in my opinion. They did win this game by 55 points, so it's a pretty big win for them. It does give them a little bit of percentage, which knocks over the Saints and a few others around that category, and the Giants as well, who did lose. But that's actually a good win for the Bulldogs, and they've got a pretty decent run home. Not the best, not the worst. They do have, let me quickly just get this up. Yeah, Hawthorn next week, West Coast, and Geelong. Now, Hawthorn is down in Tassie, so that's going to be a bit of a difficult game for them. West Coast at home, they'll win pretty easily. And then they've got Geelong at the end of the season down in Cardinia Park. So that's going to be a hard game for them. But the Bulldogs have got close down there a few times. We'll get to the votes now. 3 votes went to Marcus Bontempelli. Like I said, he was massive. Best player on the ground by a long way. Liberatore got the 2 votes, and then Ugal Hagan got the 1 vote. He started their team off very nicely in the first quarter with the 4 goals, and then was pretty good throughout the rest of the game. Kicked the goal late in the last quarter as well. After that, we get to nearly one of the biggest massive upsets of the season. Bombers versus West Coast. If it wasn't for Carl Langford, they lose this game. Bombers went up by 1 point. Boy, were they lucky to get away with this one. They had a 30-point lead, I think, through the third quarter, and they nearly gave up a win against the West Coast Eagles. And I think if it was against anyone else, even North Melbourne, they'd lose this game, the Bombers. They just don't really put a lot of teams away. We've seen that a few times this season, and a lot of times haven't been able to get over the line against teams as well. And from a really good start to the season, they've kind of petered off a little bit. I don't think they were going to be really expected to make finals, but teams like halfway through the season, it was St Kilda and Essendon who were like the really outliers going into the second half of the season, who were sitting in the top 8, looking pretty comfortable. And both of them have really fallen off at the end of this season. And I don't know about St Kilda, they're still in the 8, but they're clinging on for dear life. The Bombers won't make it now. They have completely shot themselves in the foot. I guess that's kind of fair for a young side. It is still pretty disappointing for the fans of the Bombers, though, to miss the finals after having such a promising start. The shining light from this game, though, is Kyle Langford. He's kicked 45 goals for the season. I think I've said this a few times. He is one of the most underrated players in the AFL. One player who I would really love to see in my team if I was starting up, because he's such a good forward. He's a pretty good midfielder, and he's really good down in defence as well. He's an all-round player. It's interesting because he was trained as a midfielder, I think, in pre-season, and they've just chucked him up forward, and he's on track for 50 goals here. So he's been a real shining light for the Bombers, and he's definitely something they can build off of in the next few years as they try to build towards a really good competitive side. So the 3-2-1 votes, I gave 3 votes to Kyle Langford, 2 votes to Tim Kelly, and the 1 vote to Zach Merritt. You got to give West Coast a little bit of credit. They were quite good in this game, but they lose again. And look, to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that West Coast actually showed up, to be fair. I thought that last week they would have been pretty happy with the performance against North Melbourne, be happy to take the number 1 pick at the end of the season, but maybe it looks like that they would like to win a few more games and aren't looking for the number 1 pick at this stage. So if I'm North Melbourne, I'm a bit scared right now, because West Coast have actually performed a lot better in the past few weeks, and if they knock them out of if they knock North Melbourne out of the 17th spot, and after a woeful season, one of the worst performing teams in 20, 30 plus years, West Coast, to not finish bottom, that's embarrassing for North Melbourne by a huge margin. And we'll talk about them in a little bit as well. But after that, we get to the Crows versus the Gold Coast. The Crows basically won this one in the first quarter. First quarter and a half. Gold Coast did start to fight back in the end and did make it a little bit interesting, but the Crows just burst away in the end. Good to see them pushing for finals now, and they're definitely joining that logjam in that fifth to sixth position, all the way down to about 12th now. So they're definitely giving themselves a ripe old crack. They don't have the hardest run home. They've got Brisbane next week in Brisbane, so that's a pretty tough one. Then they've got the Swans at home. That is a massive game. I think whoever loses that is eliminated from the finals race. And they've got West Coast in the final round away from home. So I could bank 2 wins there, and at the moment, with them being 10 wins in the AFL, You need 12.5 wins, maybe 13 to get there. If they can get 2 wins, they give themselves a chance with their really good percentage. So, good win from them. They needed it. Gold Coast fought hard, but they couldn't get it done in the end, and that's probably their finals race done and dusted. Interesting how if Damien Hardwick does get the job, if he can get him there next year, I think he's got the list ripe and ready to go. If they can bring in a couple of players with Damien Hardwick's appointment, that could definitely bring in some new virality to the team as well. We'll get to the votes now. 3 votes to Darcy Fogarty, was massive up forward. He kicked 3 goals, but was also massive around the ground. 2 votes to Mitch Hinge, has been brilliant off halfback. One of the best, one of the most improved players at the Crows this year. And 1 vote to Matt Crouch. Interesting that this guy has not been in the team most of the year, and suddenly now he's into the team, and he's doing a pretty good job. Next game, we move to one of the bigger upset, probably the biggest upset of the weekend by far, one of the biggest upsets of the season. Hawthorn have beaten Collingwood. You look at this one on paper, on the ladder, you would just think this is Collingwood's game every single day of the week, especially wanting to respond after that Carlton performance last week. But Hawthorn came out and really showed a good way how to beat Collingwood, and a lot of the top 4 sides at the moment aren't performing that well. Melbourne did get over the line against North Melbourne over the weekend. Brisbane only just clutched up against the Dockers, and Port Adelaide have lost 4 in a row now. So all the top 4 teams are really underperforming. This may be a year where a team outside of the top 4 can actually go all the way if they can hit their form in the right time, because there's a lot of teams out just inside the 8 to like Carlton, Sydney, the Crows even as well. If those guys can make the finals, I think they can give it a real shake, because these teams are coming in with some form, and a lot of the top 4 teams are really dropping off at the moment. So at this stage, it's really an open race, and Collingwood really need to start lifting here, because this is a pretty poor performance. They lose again, and Hawthorn, I know a lot of people have said that they've had to eat their words, and that's including me, but they're building a good team here. They really had to cut very deep. I still don't know if that was the right decision, but at this stage, it seems like it's going in the right direction for the Hawks. The votes now, we get to the 3 votes, which is James Sicily. He was massive. I think that's a pretty obvious one to get the 3 votes. 2 votes to Dylan Moore, not Darcy Moore, Dylan Moore. He was massive, kicked 2 goals as well. And then Will Day got the 1 vote for me. He was very good as well, playing off that midfield a little bit, getting all around the ground, Will Day. He's been very good this season as well. And if they did keep people like Tom Mitchell and Jay Gromira and things like that, he probably doesn't get that spot in the midfield. So good to see Will Day performing quite well as well. And it's also interesting because Tom Mitchell got subbed out as well. He was injured, but he's not really hitting the 22 in Collingwood at the moment. So maybe it was the right decision by Sam Mitchell. I still aren't 100%, but at the moment he's proven everybody wrong, and you've got to give him credit for that. After that, we get to Saturday night, Geelong versus Port Adelaide. Geelong just held on. It looked like at times that Port Adelaide could steal this one. And with the injuries that they've got, I think they performed very well, above all expectations. They had no recognised ruckman, really. I mean, Vicentini actually did really well in there. I think he had the highest centre clearances and clearances for the match. So very good from him. But of course, he's only a 3rd gamer. He'll grow into his career, I'm sure. But he definitely looks like he's ready for the level. Yeah, I think he's not exactly a AFL player just of yet. But of course, he had to come in today and give Port Adelaide something in there. And he was very good, along with Zach Butters, Jason Horne-Francis, and Rosie as well. But Geelong, down in Geelong, is always going to be a hard matchup for Port Adelaide, and they weren't able to get it done. And Geelong do keep their finals hopes alive. At the moment, though, the Cats have a pretty tough run home. They have the Pies this week, then they have the Cats... They have the Pies this week, then they have the Saints, and then they have the Bulldogs down in GMHBA Stadium. St Kilda looked okay today against Carlton, I'll give them that, but you think they win at least 2 of those, but at this stage they may have to win all 3. I don't know if they will. I think that they'll be fine if they can win 2 of those 3 games, but at the moment it's getting real close in that middle region right now, and yeah, I think basically St Kilda and the Bulldogs are the 2 vulnerable teams, along with the Giants. But yeah, the Cats did well. They needed this win. They got it. Led by Brian Myers, who is just the assist king. I know he hasn't got a lot of goals this year, but I think it's pretty hard to go past him as an All-Australian forward. He's got so many goal assists. He's a great user of the football. And he was just massive in this game as well. So he did get the 3 votes. The 2 votes went to Zach Butters and the 1 vote to Ollie Henry, who was massive in this game. And really lifted with the loss of Tom Hawkins over his injury. And he may come back in a couple of weeks. I'm not too sure about that. It's going to be tough for him to make it back, Tom Hawkins. But yeah, that was good for the Cats to get over the line against Port Adelaide. And Port Adelaide have just hit a real wall. I know they've got a lot of injuries and they just keep on stacking up. But at the moment, they are 10 points from 5th spot, which is Carlton. And Carlton's run home is not easy. They've got Melbourne, Gold Coast, and the Giants. But they'd want to be a little bit careful. I don't think Carlton will be able to knock them out of the top 4. But they've got to be careful because if they don't hit form towards the end of the season, they've got a pretty tough run home, Port Adelaide, as well. They've got the Giants next week. Then they've got the Dockers in Perth and Richmond. I mean, I could really only see... I could see them winning all 3 of them, but I could also see them losing all 3 of them. So if they hit the finals, I don't think a team who's hit finals has been in the top 4 and lost 7 in a row. I don't think Port will do that. I think they will bounce back in the next couple of weeks, but they've got to be very careful at this stage, especially going into the final series. After that, we get to the Battle of the Bridge for the Sydney Derby. Massive game. This was a great game of footy to watch. The Giants started off okay. Sydney just bounced back. Good second quarter from them. And they just were able to hold the Giants at bay for the rest of the game. The Swans really give themselves a chance now of making the 8. They're currently 10th. Have an awkward run home. They have the Gold Coast next week, which have been their bogey side for a while. The Crows at Adelaide Oval and Melbourne to finish off the season at home. Massive 3 games. I don't know if they can win all 3 of them. They may have to, though, if they want to make the finals. And if they do, they'd be on 7 on the trot, and they could definitely get the top 8 a shake. But it's going to be massive, and they did get a win against the informed Giants. So they're definitely hitting some form late in the season, and led by young gun Errol Goulden. He has been massive this season, Errol Goulden. If he doesn't make the All-Australian team, I think it's just bullshit. As a wingman right now, him, Lockie Hunter, Ed Langdon, I think... and Josh Dacos, I think he's leading all of them. I think if he's playing in Collingwood right now, he has been the most talked about player in the competition, maybe with Nick Dacos. He has been massive this season for the Swans. Amazing ball user, always gets his touches, always around the ball, tough over it, a good finisher. I don't think there's anything you can say about him that's weakness in his game, and he's definitely getting a lot of votes towards the end of the season as well, especially in the Riders' medal, which is, of course, way more important than the Brownlow medal. He's getting a lot of votes late in the season. So he obviously got the 3 votes. Tom Green got the 2 votes, and the 1 vote went to Hayden McLean, was massive up forward with the 4 goals. Went into the ruck as well as second ruck, and he actually performed quite well in there as well as he has for quite a while now. But I think with obviously the Buddy Franklin retirement, he did actually do quite well up forward, but obviously Tom Hickey had to come back so he could give a bit more support to Logan McDonald and Joel Amati. So good play from Sydney. I think the 3 key forwards can work for them, and I think that they're going to be a tough team to beat in the next couple of weeks. After that, we get down to Tassie, North Melbourne versus Melbourne. First game back for Alistair Clarkson. They started off very, very well. North Melbourne kicking 5 goals to, I think, 1 in the first quarter. But then they only kicked 5 more goals for the rest of the game, and Melbourne bounced back pretty well. We're able to just pull them back, and a really good performance by Melbourne in the end. We're able to get 100 points yet again. It looks like they've finally found the forward structure. If it wasn't for the fact that Harrison Petty went down in the 3rd quarter with an injury, really unfortunate for him. They finally look like to have found the combination that they needed up forward, but unfortunately he's gone down. So they were able to beat North Melbourne, but I don't know how they're going to do it the next few weeks. It's going to be interesting who they'll put up there now and see who they can finally find a score from. But North Melbourne, I mean, look, they're not as bad as West Coast, but, I mean, they've lost to West Coast. They nearly lost their 17th spot down to 18th again. We have not seen the team finish bottom 4, I think, this many consecutive years in a row for a very long time. It's not looking good, and look, we'll see how they go next season with a pre-season and a whole season probably from Alistair Clarkson, they would hope, but there's not much to build off of at the moment, and they're not looking good at all. This season's going to be a very tough run home for them, the next 3 weeks, trying to just get to the end of the season. I think they'd be happy to call the season now for them. They've got the Bombers, the Tigers, and the Gold Coast to end the season. So look, how the Bombers played last week, I mean, they give a chance, but, I mean, are they playing good enough? I don't know. We'll see how they go. The votes now, though, we get to Christian Petrarca with the 3 votes. Jack Zeeble with the 2. He was brilliant. And I think he just has to play in this team next year. Hopefully he goes on for North fans, but he was just very good. And the 1 vote went to Lockie Hunter. After that, we get to one of the biggest games of the round going in, which was St Kilda versus Carlton. Whoever won this game basically secured their spot in the 8. And the team who lost it was just going to be right back in the pack. And Carlton, after being down for a lot of this game, in the last quarter, were just able to pull in front and kept St Kilda goalless in the last quarter, which was massive from them. And now I think Carlton are pretty well secured in that top 8 spot. They have at the moment, I think it's 11 wins, is it? Let me just quickly check. They have 11.5 wins, obviously with that draw in round 1. You need 12.5, 13 to make the 8. Their next 3 games are pretty tough. Like I said, Melbourne, Gold Coast, GWS. I think they'll be able to get the Gold Coast done. They get that one away from home, though. They got Melbourne next week, and that will be a massive game for them. They've got 7 wins on the trot. You give them a real chance in this game. And then the Giants in round 23 is going to be massive as well. Obviously, the Giants look like at this stage that will be their final. They may have to win that game to get there. So, yeah, but they were brilliant in this game. Carlton had to do it a bit differently. They weren't up for a lot of the game. They had to pull in front late, but they did it brilliantly. I watched this game live on stream, and Carlton are going to be a hard team to beat, especially if they get into how they go in September, because I think they make it now. I don't think they miss it. And what a massive turnaround this team's had. Michael Voss to change this team in the space of, mid-season, which is very hard to do. He's done brilliantly. And Carlton are finals bound now, and I think are going to be very hard to beat if they when they make it. But we get to the votes now. Newman got the 3 votes in this game. Mason Wood got the 2 votes and the 1 vote to Sam Doherty. Just one quick mention of St Kilda before we move on to the last game. They're in free fall now. Their next 3 games are Richmond, Geelong, and Brisbane. Richmond, massive game. Geelong at home, so at Marvel Stadium, and then Brisbane at the Gabba to finish the season. At this stage, I don't know if they beat Richmond. They don't beat Geelong, and Brisbane at the Gabba, they're not going to win that. So, St Kilda did hold up very well in defence for 3.5 quarters. Well, 3.5 quarters. They kept Charlie Curnow goalless until the last quarter, but they have no attacking structure. They don't get enough goals from their forwards. Their midfielders don't get goals either. It's just really poor in the end, really, and I don't see much working for them going forward if they don't find some better small forwards. They don't get some goal-kicking midfielders, and yeah, that's really a downfall for St Kilda after having a massive start to the season and now really tumbling away at the seams. And it's going to be really interesting if St Kilda can hold on to that spot, but at this stage I think they fall out of the 8 by next week. And finally, we get to a massive thriller down in Perth. Fremantle versus the Brisbane Lions. Brisbane just held on late to secure a win against the Dockers, and I did say in the Instagram post that they made the top 2. They missed out by a percentage point because they didn't win by enough against Fremantle, and Melbourne now are in second. But they do keep their their top 2 spot alive. Their next 3 games are a bit tough. They've got the Crows next week at home, which they should be able to win. Collingwood in Melbourne, and then St Kilda at home. They should be able to win 2 of them, but I don't know if they can beat Collingwood in Melbourne. It's going to be a very tough game for them. But if they do want their top 2 spot to stay alive, they need to win this game. And if they can get a home final, they're going to be very hard to beat and could very well be grand finalists this year by just getting a home final, because they're nearly impossible to beat over there. Fremantle were brave here, and they did keep their mathematical hopes alive if they won this game. I don't think it would have mattered. But they are playing some okay footy in the past few weeks. We saw them beat Geelong down in Geelong, which they've had an okay record down there. But they do have something to build off of. I think they need a little bit more midfield depth. They need to find a key forward, but they've been looking for that for 20 years. Sorry, since Pavlich left. But they've been looking for that forward combination for 20, 30 years, since basically their induction into the AFL. So they need to find something. But their recruit, who was obviously very questioned at the start of the year, was Luke Jackson. He was massive in this game. It shows that he needs to be a ruckman. I will be interested to see what happens in the off-season with Sean Darcy, because this guy needs to be a ruckman for the club. He is massive. He's able to get the ball on the ground. He's basically he's like basically a 4th midfielder in there. He was massive in this game and got the 3 votes for me. Kicked the goal, was massive around the ground, and I just don't know how they keep them both in this side, Sean Darcy and Luke Jackson. We saw Melbourne obviously try to bring the Gawn and Grundy 2 ruckman combo. It obviously didn't work. We are obviously a lot of talks now that Grundy's going to leave. I'd be very interested to see if Sean Darcy stays at the club next year. I think that they can make some real cash from Sean Darcy leaving and then potentially throwing that at a forward, which they desperately need. So we'll be interested to see. Good game from him. He got the 3 votes. 2 votes to Lachie Neale, was massive in the middle. Got him over the line, in my opinion. And the 1 vote went to Caleb Sarong. But yeah, guys, that is the review of round 21 and a massive round coming up next week.